So on the next slide, I want to talk to you, by the way, I'm Brian. So I'm one of the data managers in PSA. And I want to talk to you about the services that the data flow team provides, has provided in the past, and also might potentially provide for your team in the future. So on the next slide, you can see all of the pieces that we as the data flow team touch. So we're looking to where are the sources of errors that happen during data entry in your protocol from start to finish? How are you communicating your protocol to your technical staff or to other researchers? How are you versioning your protocol? Like, you know, if you implement an experiment this year and then you discover something wrong with it and you want to have the next year, you know, is it version 1, version 2, where is it stored? All these kinds of questions. And then the sort of like meat and potatoes is, you know, we've got to provide security to all of our on-farm participants. And we also want to have privacy for our, you know, corporate partners. But then we also want to be providing what data people can see back to them in real time. And then all of this is, you know, these are technical products that we're developing and providing to you, and we want to be there to train your students or you or your technical staff on how all of this works, how they can implement it, and sort of other best practices. So on the next slide, the sort of main goal that we focus on is how we can reduce the bottlenecks in your process. We want to automate the hard parts of your research, and we want to scale up the tedious parts that are currently hard to do. Something that we have run into, though, is that we need to remember not to over-engineer a solution. We can't let the technology get in the way of the research. But likewise, there might be some aspect of your research that you think, oh, this isn't worth building out some technical tool for because I can just do this. But maybe in 5 years, if you want to scale this up to 100 farms, it'll be worth it. So on the next slide, you'll see kind of the data lifecycle model. And so every piece of your data has to go through this chain somehow. And maybe in the past it was collecting data, putting it on a paper data sheet, ingesting it into the computer by typing it into Excel, organizing it by having a shared folder in Google Drive, and then somebody says, hey, I want this subset of data, and you email them a CSV or an Excel file. And we know that that works great for small independent collaborations, but for a large network, we want to automate as many of those processes as possible. And so some examples of things that we have implemented are using forms that Sarah's going to talk about through Kobo, and you've heard mentioned by Resham, barcode scanning so that each sample is uniquely identified, webhooks, that basically means a server that's always listening for you to send in new data. But then also using existing platforms. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel. We're still using things like Google Drive or Google Sheets where they're appropriate. In terms of organization, we really are enamored with this idea of relational databases where they're appropriate and document-based databases where they're not. So that's an example of a data store. So for example, the social science team might be talking about the interviews they're doing. Those are not appropriate for a relational database, but they are appropriate for a data store. And then ultimately, it's all about delivery. So we have to have APIs so that the data is exposed to the end user. And if you're saying, what's an API? An API is just like going to something in the web browser. It's how computers talk to each other. And ultimately, then those serve dashboards, which you'll also see some examples of. So on the next slide, you'll see this is a case study of the protocol that Chris was talking about earlier, where we had an excellent field protocol that worked great on station by technical experts at Texas A&M. And they had sort of like the machine learning down, and they had, you know, all the expertise down, but they didn't have the capability to deploy this to non-experts, which is one of the other things that Chris mentioned. So we needed to make it light and tight so that non-experts could also execute this. And so the way that we got around this was, instead of having to send an expert out to the field, you take an image and you just print out, on the next slide, a QR code that was automatically generated. It was automatically stored in Google Drive so that you could just download all the QR codes, print them out, stick it in the picture, upload the photo, and you didn't have to do anything else. And that way we were able to know what photo came from where, what treatment it was, all of these things. And so this is an example of something where the data flow team wrote code to make someone else's protocol work. And that is, a back and forth conversation of, what you want your protocol to do, and then we have a meeting and we figure out an iteration of the protocol that is deployable, scalable, and is the least work for everyone involved. On the next slide, I'm going to mention our biggest infrastructure. You'll often hear it called the database. It has 57 tables, and a table is just like an Excel sheet, and it has 56 million cells of data. Chris said earlier it has over 1 million rows. It's actually over 4 million rows. Most of that, however, is from some of these other products. So you've heard the weather API mentioned. That was something that got built out by the Dataflow team in collaboration with the University of Georgia. And then also the sensor information that's coming in. That's sort of the bulk of all of these automated records in the database. So this is hitting the organize and deliver roles of that data flow lifecycle. The collecting and ingesting are happening through Kobo forms, through some other spreadsheet type interfaces, through the tech dashboard, and through the automated sensor network. The important thing about having a relational database like this is that it lives in the cloud, so it's accessible anywhere. It's permissioned, so not every user can see all the data. That way we can have protected fields like, growers' personal information, or, if you want your technician from one state to not be able to see all the other states. They can only see their own state data for certain tables. It is a complete database. There's literally no part of the on-farm protocol that is not recorded in this database. So there's kind of this one-to-one mapping between all these steps in the protocol go to all of these tables and rows and columns. And there's an excellent diagram by Lee that is on our GitHub page that I'll get to in a minute that kind of lays out all that mapping. And it's also verifiable. You've heard this idea of a data shepherd. An example of a data shepherd is Resham for the decomp litter bags, and Lee for a bunch of the other data. And the idea is that each piece of data that comes in, it's obviously first quality checked by the technician who's entering the data. But then we want someone who is an expert on, for example, decomp litter bags to look at all the decomp litter bags data from all the states and say, oh, I think that these are all good. I'm going to approve them, and that gets recorded in the database. And that way we can have both the live data that is not yet validated, as well as the data that is appropriate to use in a model that we know has been validated. And so this is a big, complicated beast. It's been evolving over several years now, and we're going to take what we've learned to implement sort of miniaturized versions for the other teams as you need them or as are appropriate. On the next slide, the question is, how do you do all this? Where is all this? You've heard about our YouTube channel. It's been mentioned in a couple of other talks. This is an example of a series of YouTube videos that I made in January walking through the database. And there are also these written tutorials that go along. So you can find that on our GitHub page. And where do you find links to all that? Well, on the next slide, we have precisionsustainableag.org, and you go to the internal, enter the password PSA, and go to the Dataflow team page. And this will have links to the YouTube channel. It has links to the grower dashboard, the tech dashboard, all of these things. And the GitHub page, which is the next slide. So, like I said, all of this data stuff happens through code. You know, this isn't dragging and dropping Excel files. The idea is that these are automated tools. So all of our work is now in this GitHub repository. You can contribute to it, you can take pieces out of it, you can use it as a tutorial, you can not interface with it at all. Like I said, all of this really happens through having a meeting with someone from the data flow team and figuring out what pieces are and aren't appropriate for your piece of the project. And so then the last slide that I have is another example of one of the tools that we've built. And this is the real-time grower dashboard. You'll find a link to this on the PSA internal site as well. And this is an example of something that ties all that together, where it's real-time data coming from the database. It is permissioned so that farmers can only see their data. And it's also something that is constantly evolving in the public sphere. So you can look at the code, it's open source, you can make contributions to it, and all those kinds of things. I will mention that there are other tools like this that have also been built out. So for example, there is a map generator that shows all of the sites so that you can embed that in a presentation. You've seen a few examples of that map in the presentations today. And so I kind of skimmed over everything really quick because I know we're running a little bit behind. But the idea is that I wanted to show you where you find all of these things and who to ask. So anytime you have a question about tech, just ask me. I'll direct you to the right person. I'll direct you to the right website, and we will build something out for you. And so now Sarah is going to get into the nitty-gritty of some of the other aspects of it.
Thank you, Brian. Again, I'm Sarah, and I'm not just your email coordinator. My function in PSA is to polish protocols, and not just for the on-farm network, though I'm going to use most examples there, but to think about protocol delivery from expert scientists into the rest of the network so that we can do robust models. I like to put the precision in precision sustainable ag. Next slide. Oh, paper. We talk in the very beginning of this about getting rid of paper a lot, and how we've moved from paper to a more digital model, especially in the ag world. And I still love paper, but paper does not get us those on-farm dashboards that you just saw. It does not give us databases or instant maps. It certainly does not give us DSTs. And so it's really important for us as a network to completely evolve, and us as scientists as well. So the first step in this evolution and the framework that we've built in PSA is to think about a highly edited protocol. And we have decided that we want to use Google Docs as our main platform to do this. And experts can collaborate together across multiple states in the network. It is very transparent. It is real time. There's versioning control. It is really a strong tool to build a new protocol. The next step in protocol development is to build a very highly structured and formatted data sheet, so that after you walk through your protocol, you understand exactly every metric you want to collect, how, units, everything. We moved in the first few years to a Google Sheets. It's very structured. You can lock columns and rows so that people cannot edit it, so the data shepherd can control it. It's always in one file so that you can check in on where your data is. It's better than emailing Excel sheets back and forth. So we're really encouraging the Google Sheets model as a way to communicate data. It can also be linked directly to a database and is a tool that we still use. But it was not perfect. People still misinterpret columns. They still don't understand exactly what we're asking for. So we're moving to a more hybrid approach. And Brian talked about this. A hybrid approach is a form. It's a mixture of a protocol and a sheet, or and you guys are familiar with that. Google Forms is widely used now, but we're going to use Kobo Toolbox. It is a very fancy, very specific, customizable form. And then the highest tier of this evolution is a custom web app. And we'll see some of those. We have now, we have a developer that is building us customized websites to take in data. Next slide. So Kobo Toolbox is a free open source online software where anybody can go outside of PSA. It is intended for field data collection. It's used in the humanitarian sector, and it is highly customizable. Anybody can use it for their data management. So it's perfect for embedding protocols. It does a step-by-step asking. It's great for onboarding new researchers in that way, but you can hide steps. There's also a choose your own adventure sort of feature. It makes calculations on the fly. Here in this network, we're very concerned about flexibility across the entire system, but having very highly rigid standardized metrics so that it is universal translation into the database. So that's very quality controlled is what we're going for. It saves a lot of time for individual scientists. There's no formatting on the back end. It's just transferred right into the database in a consistent format. And the most important part of Kobo, hands down, is that it is an offline data collection tool. There's no Wi-Fi or cell service. There's no laptops on these farms. So it is a mobile app that collects everything offline. And as soon as it hits a signal, it will sync everything directly into a central database. Next slide. So we use Kobo in the on-farm network, and this is a shot of our website. We use it as both our data collection tool as well as our most up-to-date protocol because it has those steps. And you can see this is just a list on the side of a smattering of the protocols and metrics that we collect in the network. And on the right-hand side is a direct link to where to get those data entry tools. For example, you can click on one of the surveys and it will pull up a PDF form for that Kobo so that you have a one-place shop for everything that you're expected to collect and how and where. And you can see, I really want to reiterate this, as we are on the on-farm moving onto this high-tech dashboard sort of phase, we are still using a tool of Google Sheets. We're not trying to over-engineer, like Brian said, something to be way too technical. If it is more practical to enter ashless weights into an Excel spreadsheet or a Google Sheet, that's how we will do it. And I'm here to help people walk through the steps of where we can be more efficient and more clear. Next slide. So I'm going to try and whip through a protocol that we're actually using on a form right now in Kobo. And for new on-farm people, this is our spring biomass cover crop harvest. So it has an opening welcome screen. Are you new? If you are, it has a little intro video. We want standardized protocol management in this network, and we want you to do exactly what we do. Not that we are over controlling, but that we've discovered that there are between 100 scientists are at least 100 different ways to collect biomass. And sometimes it's hard to communicate the differences. So we really want to communicate the precise ways that we use our tools. Next slide. So Kobo has a lot of neat data collection metrics. It has a required field so that you can standardize the way people label things and make sure that nothing is missed. It has easy GPS collection. It's a fantastic place to put metadata that just doesn't necessarily belong in spreadsheets. For example, technicians go to a farm and they need to write down the cover crop termination date. It's very important for a model, but they might write it on a napkin, stick it in the truck. In this format, everything is in one form, from dates to GPS to all of the weights collected. Next slide. It provides step-by-step instructions and different screens for different choices. In this example, if your cover crop has been drilled versus broadcast, you select drilled, and that will bring you to the next screen set of instructions for enter your drill line spacing. In this example, we have a 7.5 inches, and that will do a customized calculation for how to best harvest a 1 meter square area based on the drill spacing. You now have to do 6 drill lines at 87 centimeters long. And that is so we have the most accurate representation, no matter what was planted and in what manner. So it really gets rid of a lot of user error. Next slide. Next. Am I frozen? Are we going on the next slide? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. So the next step in the protocol is that you would enter fresh weights. You would enter this on a number pad. Then it makes a quick calculation. In the protocol for decomposition bags, there's a ton of steps. And in the field, you would have to take a fresh weight. You would then have to divide it over the number of bags you would use. You would probably have to subtract some things that you had on the scale. And in this form, it does all of those calculations for you. And this was formerly a 12-page, very specific Google document that then had 3 or 4 associated spreadsheets with it. And this form can combine them all into one. Next slide. And we talked a little bit about how important barcodes are in this network. The tablet has a camera on it, and so it's a quick way to open up and scan a barcode. Decomposition bags actually, as a protocol, have 7 unique steps they end up touching, from a fresh weight all the way to NIR and ground biomass. There are 7 opportunities to miswrite that label, mistype it, mishandwrite it, and we have found that no matter what, somebody will mistype that label. And the database, it cannot handle that. So barcodes are fast, they're easy, and they're quality control so that things shuffle in real time. And at the end of the form, there's a quick validation. When you hit submit, it will validate to make sure you haven't missed anything on accident, make sure that all of the metrics are in an expected format, and there's a little splash screen about what to do next. When you get back to the lab, don't forget to put these in at 60 degrees Celsius. So we make sure that everybody does the same thing. Next slide. So before I got into this, I actually was in the field sort of full time for this project. So I'm very aware of how hard the field technician's job is. They're going to many farms. They're having to memorize a lot of these protocols. They're collecting a ton of data very fast. And so I'm here to help the field team have the easiest, simplest data collection that they can have that's very satisfying. And we have these poor technicians painstakingly beta testing these forms, always giving us feedback. And then those forms are uploaded into the database that Brian was discussing, created by Orly and him. And that is how we get the next tools we're going to talk about, visualizations on the tech dashboard. So a tech dashboard created by our web developer, Rohit Banduni, is a place to aggregate every piece of data that the technician touches. It can be very frustrating to have to go to the sensor data in the cloud is on one website, and the Kobo forms are on another website, and spreadsheets from NIR are on another website. This is a great one-stop shop, and it also does real-time visualization. This is a graph up to date of the water sensors that Alondra talked to you about so that technicians can see and troubleshoot in real time. Next slide. So none of the data that you are about to see is publicly available. In fact, it's highly secure. There's a role-based authentication system, sort of this 2-step process. People have to sign up for a GitHub account, and then I have to approve what they can see. And users are very limited on their permissions. They generally can only see exactly what they entered, and all data is stored very safely. And almost no one gets edit access because we really want to maintain the integrity of the raw data. Next slide. The tech dashboard offers quick, easy data monitoring. We have a color-coded system for the sensor devices. When they are sending information to a website, a technician can log onto this website, and green means that those sensors are receiving data to the cloud, and yellow means they have lost activity in the past 24 hours, and they might want to investigate those graphs to see if something is wrong. It really helps triage how the technicians are spending their time going to the field. Next slide. Our newest customization is specific to the on-farm sites. It's a site enrollment. We really needed this tool because we've had the same growers over the past few years, and it's really important to link their sites consistently. so that this example, this grower has been in the network since 2018, and so he has a specific producer ID, and we want to make sure to link that information together. There's a stepwise approach here where you can select a grower or enter a new one, select the number of sites, and it generates codes for you. You can input things like addresses, notes, the farm is 2 mailboxes down on the dirt road, stuff like that, so that you can save site information. Next slide. And the most important part of the tech dashboard is a quality control for both the technician and the data shepherd. Once you insert any type of data, that site information we just talked about, or a Kobo form, it sucks it into this sort of all data view where you can see and custom sort everything that you want, from the county you're looking for to the year those sites might be, to all the fresh weights of your biomass. There's a search function so that you can quickly access the things that you entered somewhere else. And the data shepherds are the people who generally are first authors of a very specific protocol, and they can access in real time where their data is at so that there's no missing points. Or if they see a missing point, they can help communicate and alert the technician, understand why, how they can help. Is that data missing because the bag disappeared, or is that data being expected? So this really helps communication across the network. Next slide. And again, to reiterate exactly what Brian finished up on, we keep all this stuff in our team portal. But our team portal, of course, is a semi-private, moderately password protected thing that holds our Google Drive, notes, videos, links, stuff like that. And it is not to be confused with some of the more advanced tools that we are building. There is a link for this on farmtech.org, the tech dashboard you just saw. It's nested inside the portal, but you still need a very secure and private access to get to that. That's just a demo of some of the on-farm tools that we've built and some of the ways that we can help the network as well.